It's a giant deep-sea koan that's been chained to the surface for hundreds of years. The king trapped him in this mysterious sea because he often swallowed human ships by mistake. The giant koan spent his days in tears, longing to be free, until one day he met Avanti and a little donkey. The kind-hearted Avanti decided to help him out of his predicament. He rode the donkey straight towards the giant's nostrils. Inside the giant's nostrils, the donkey scratched him with his wings. An itchy sensation spreads all over his body. He couldn't stand the sensation. His whole body started to exert force, and the thick chain was shaken by the powerful force. In the end, he sneezes and breaks free from his bonds. Avanti and Little Donkey were also sprayed out, but luckily Little Donkey could fly, so they didn't fall to their deaths. Unbeknownst to them, this donkey was originally a divine horse in the heavenly realm, but he escaped to the lower realms when the guards went to the Peach Blossom Festival. But he fell into the water because he was unfamiliar with the place. But Avanti found him in time and rescued him. In order to repay Avanti for saving his life, the divine horse turned into a small donkey and guarded him, and also brought 2 strong horses for Avanti. But last night's arrival of the divine horse had destroyed a large wheat field and the farmer was charging towards Avanti in an aggressive manner. The little donkey let Avanti ride on him, and with a whoosh, he was gone 180,000 miles away. That's not a donkey. That's a Lamborghini. But Avanti decided to sell the 2 BMWs to compensate the farmer for his loss. As soon as they entered the market, they were surrounded by people. Unexpectedly, the greedy king watched them. Avanti had no choice but to watch as the king took the BMWs for himself. The little donkey on the side, however, was not used to the king's overbearing behavior and blew a loud whistle, only to see the 2 BMWs instantly broke out of the door, not expecting the king, who had not yet got off the car, to be pulled out together. In the end, the king lost control and fell headlong into the flour, turning into Snow White. Although the king was humiliated in front of his people, he couldn't put Avanti to death, so the cunning king gave Avanti a way to redeem himself. In the deepest part of the desert, there lived a vicious firebird that often attacked the king's soldiers. If Avanti could destroy it, he wouldn't be punished for offending the king. Avanti had no choice but to take his donkey into the firebird's territory. Judging from the armor and weapons on the ground, he knew how many human soldiers had been swallowed here, but Avanti still had the courage to throw the nuts he had prepared on the sand. Legend has it that this kind of nut can make the firebird's body soften and lose its strength. As time went by, a red light was lit up under the sand in front of us. Suddenly a hot flame sprang out of the ground. To see carefully, this is not a firebird but a cultivation of 10,000 years of fire phoenix. The newly awakened phoenix leapt up and shot into the sky. Those who see the phoenix will be lucky if they stay here. The phoenix is excited when it finds food on the ground. It crosses its fingers and grabs a nut and throws it into the air, then jumps up gracefully and catches it in its mouth and finally swallows it with its shell. As the phoenix eats more and more, it starts to feel weak and unable to stand. But even so, it couldn't resist the temptation of the food and fell to the ground after grabbing the last nut. Before it fell asleep, the phoenix swallowed the last nut before it fell asleep completely. Fire Phoenix was caught in an iron net and the man was going to take it back to the king. The poor phoenix begged the man to let her go and then shed a hot tear. The sadness of the phoenix made the man feel compassionate, and he then untied the heavy iron net. The phoenix was reborn as if it was in nirvana. It looked at the man gratefully and then waved its huge wings and shot up into the sky. The phoenix symbolizes good fortune, so if you leave it behind, you'll be able to do whatever you want. In order to repay the man's kindness, the phoenix left behind one of its original feathers, which could protect the man from harm in times of crisis. But because Avanti didn't catch the phoenix, he was arrested by the king. Avanti wanted to take out the original real feather to prove himself, but now the feather is dull and shineless, even worse than chicken feathers. This made everyone laugh. The king thought that Avanti had tricked him and ordered Avanti to be executed on the spot. Just as the executioner lifted the axe, the original feather suddenly burst into flames. Everyone looked up and realized that the phoenix had sensed that Avanti was in danger and rushed over. Then it landed on top of the town and instantly surrounded the whole town with warm fire. It was only then that everyone believed that Avanti was not lying and called him a hero. The king had no choice but to honor Avanti in front of everyone, but behind his back, he was already resentful. Soon after, the king issued an order for Avanti to awaken the snow princess at the top of the snowy mountain and bring her back to marry the queen. The king thought that Avanti would die on the way. Unbeknownst to him, Avanti had a magical little donkey to help him. Soon they arrived at the top of the snowy mountain, but the frozen gate in front of them blocked Avanti out. Just when Avanti was at a loss, the original true feather burned up again and went straight into the ice door. In the blink of an eye, the heavy ice door instantly turned into ice and water. The small donkey with short limbs was washed down and finally froze into an ice bullet stuck on the cliff. Avanti, carefully into the ice palace, finally met the legendary snow princess. At this time, the original true feather will wake up the princess from sleep. But when the snow princess learned that the one who wanted to marry her was an old man, she said she would rather die than go back with Avanti. Then the princess pulled Avanti and jumped off the cliff. Luckily, Little Donkey flapped his wings and came in time to save them. Avanti successfully brought the princess back to the palace, but the princess refused to marry the king on the grounds that she lacked her grandmother's Heart of the Sea ring. When she learnt that the ring had been swallowed by a whale, the king summoned Avanti. Apparently, the task of retrieving the ring falls back on Avanti. The scene changes and Avanti is flying on a donkey over the sea when he is accidentally hit by a flock of seagulls. When Little Donkey pulls Avanti up again, he finds a super whale in front of him. which is firmly chained to the surface of the sea. I don't know how many years the whale has been trapped in this place, but on its back there is a small island with a lot of foliage. When the whale saw Avanti, he shed a bunch of tears. Avanti realized that the whale was asking for help. The kind-hearted Avanti decided to help the whale to regain his freedom. He got on his donkey and dove into the whale's nostrils. The donkey used the feathers on his wings to scratch the whale's nostrils. The whale felt an itch all over his body, and then the power in his body burst out. A huge sneeze erupted like a volcano. The thick chain was finally broken and the whale finally got out of its predicament and returned to the depths of the sea. To thank Avanti, the whale sent a crayfish to deliver a diamond ring made of pure gold. Unexpectedly, it was the heart of the ocean that the king wanted to find, but Avanti hesitated because if the king got this ring, the princess would have no reason to refuse to marry the king. It turned out that Avanti's heart had already fallen in love with the princess and he decided to risk everything for her. Late at night, Avanti was going to run away with the princess. Unexpectedly, this scene was seen by the minister from afar. Before they could escape, the minister and his soldiers arrested them. When the king heard the noise, he grabbed his weapon and went to the window. When he saw the donkey in the distance, he pulled the trigger without saying a word. The donkey was pierced by the bullet and fell from the sky. In order to save Princess Avanti, she told the king the secret of her eternal life, but the cunning king was half believing it. Then a minister gave the king a bad idea. The next day, at the entrance of the palace, the soldiers brought in 3 huge iron pots. The first was filled with boiling water. The second wave was seawater that could instantly turn a person into a popsicle. The third wave was poisoned milk. As long as the king could pass through the 3 cauldrons, he would be granted eternal life. But the cunning king didn't want to try so easily. He pushed Avanti down. The princess took off her ring and threw it into the cauldron. Avanti successfully passed the first test. Then he fell into the freezing cold pot and instantly Avanti's body was frozen into an ice stick. At that moment, the original feathers of the fire phoenix rushed into the pot and Avanti successfully passed the second test. But when Avanti fell into the third poisonous pot, the princess was dumbfounded because there was nothing she could do to help Avanti get out of the trap. All the people present thought that Avanti's body was already dead and were sorry to see him go. At that moment, a white light suddenly flew from the sky, and at a closer look, it was a glowing dandelion, which fell straight into the poison pot. In the blink of an eye, Avanti came back to life like a fire phoenix. It turned out that the seriously injured little donkey ran desperately to the end of the world before stepping on the only flower of life and death in the world. When the king saw that Avanti had gained eternal life, he jumped into the pot without saying a word. Unexpectedly, the king was trapped in a huge bubble and finally drifted into the boundless universe. The people recognized Avanti's heroic actions. Avanti became their new king and lived a life of shame with the princess. In the end, if you had to choose between the little donkey fire phoenix and the snow princess, which one would you choose?